Welcome back to Inside Politics, and thank you for staying with us. Kenyans holding ordinary passports will now be allowed to enter South Africa on a new visa-free regime between the two countries starting January 1st next year. While signing the agreement at State House Nairobi, President William Ruto and visiting South Africa President Cyril Ramaphosa also agreed on a return policy in case the immigration laws and policies are breached. And as our senior political affairs reporter Chris Thairo reports, both presidents agreed on exploring more business opportunities in the two countries.
It was his first official visit in the country under a new regime led by President William Ruto. And President Cyril Ramaphosa, who arrived in the country Monday evening for a two-day official visit, started by inspecting a guard of honor at State House Nairobi, where he was received by his host, President William Ruto. After a 3-hour closed-door meeting, the presidents and their cabinet secretaries had struck a deal.
Kenyans holding ordinary passports will be allowed to enter South Africa on a visa-free regime for up to 90 days per calendar year. The two countries have also agreed on a return policy when immigration laws and regulations are breached.
We agreed that indeed Kenyans should be able to visit South Africa without requiring them to have visas, and that this dispensation will commence on the 1st of January in 2023, and that our officials will speed up the processes of putting this into effect.
Over the years, South Africa had made their visa restrictions tough, making it an uphill task for Kenyans to secure a visa to South Africa. It takes more than 5 days for your visa to be processed after buying a fee of 5,350 shillings, whereas South Africans get a free visa upon arrival in the country.
Kenyans and South Africans have multiplicities of relations, both business, social, communal, at a relatives level. They want to be able to travel, and tourism also between our two countries will be greatly enhanced through this.
From January 1, Your Excellency, we will have a different regime, thanks to your personal intervention on this matter and the wealth of experience that have been brought on board by your officials.
So we thank you for welcoming us here to Kenya. We're really delighted, and we almost feel like Kenyans today. Thank you very much.
Last year, South Africa told Kenya to take back all its illegal immigrants before easing the restrictions. Even as he bid his guests all the best in his tour to the country, it is worth noting that in the recent weeks, President William Ruto has moved to establish himself as a diplomatic powerhouse, having met fellow presidents, prime ministers and diplomats regionally and internationally, strengthening friendships and striking multi-billion shillings deals. However, Ruto has shown signs of looking west, engaging more with the United States and the UK.
Going closer to the West is the right thing to do, because you remember since 1963, Kenya has been working closely with the West. And Kenya is Kenya because of the West. So it is true that the president going out to sign serious deals with the West is a good direction for the people of Kenya.
His first trips abroad as president were to the UK and the US, respectively, nations he visited ahead of the August 9 election in a diplomatic charm offensive. Chris Thairo, KTN News at State House, Nairobi.
Indeed, that story sets this pace for the conversation about, President William Ruto's diplomacy. We've seen him even at COP27 last week in Egypt, the United Nations Climate Change Conference. The head of state entered partnerships with various companies and nations. We did see his interactions, gentlemen, with, various heads of state, ministers, foreign ministers, ministers of various portfolios in Egypt. Beginning with you, Bichachi, again, when you look at William Ruto, the president, and how he is handling the whole issue of regional and international affairs, the tours that he has had, the trips he has had out of the country, the deals that have been announced back then, they are not only, visible, but one could even argue that even tangible, because, I mean, like the visa issue is one that even the South African president described as thorny. Is it that, President Ruto appears to be doing something better than his predecessors?
Better. You have to compare apples with apples. Yes. So we've not done the full analysis of what Kibaki did regionally, what Uhuru did, and what President Ruto is doing. Now, is it significant that we have visa-free access to South Africa? Yes, it is. It's significant because of one of the trade that needs to happen between the two countries. Let's just remember that in sub-Saharan Africa, you've got Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya. Those are the three most important countries in Africa in terms of how big their economies are. So the integration between Kenya and South Africa is very, very critical. I think it's an important thing. And the difficulty with which Kenyans used to have hitherto to access South Africa being removed is a big deal. At the same time, announcing that the UK is going to sponsor dams and other infrastructure projects in Kenya is a big deal. It's a big deal because Kenya does need that infrastructure. And I'm very glad that people are waking up to the reality that, yes, we do eat roads. The people who are saying we don't eat roads and things like that have now changed their tones and have realized that infrastructure and infrastructure development is a critical part of developing our country. But at the same time, there's, and your news reporter reported this as well, William Ruto seems to have turned back to the West. Yes. And he's doing a lot of deals with the West. Now, this is a marked departure from looking east. Now, why is this crucial? It is crucial because China has let off a lot of steam in its Belt and Road Initiative, from which many African countries were getting a lot of resources to build the SGRs and expressways, etc. that we were doing. Now, when that money grows cold, where do you turn to? You must turn to the West. Why? Because at the end of the day, the objectives of the country must be met. And that is what we must congratulate the president for seeing that Kenya needs to continue to develop. We need the infrastructure, and we need to create opportunities for Kenyans to go outside the country and also do business, because one of the biggest exports that Kenya actually exports is not tea or coffee. It is our human labor. Our rate of repatriation of resources from outside the country is quite big. So we need to continue to support the exporting of services coming out of Kenya. So this is a good move on the part of the president.
Ishmael, when you look at the president, how he's handling his international visitors, when he's handling diplomats, even those that have we've seen even the US ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, has made several appearances and visits to the president at State House when various delegations are coming in. When looking at the West as opposed to the East that we've had for just about a decade or so and counting, and then the opportunities that seem to lie ahead for Kenyans, what did you speak to how Ruto is handling this whole issue of international relations?
Well, one, Ruto is too good when it comes to can I say relating with people, how he greets you, receives you, and all that. But I think in terms of diplomatic meaning, that is neither here nor there. You can decide to not smile the whole morning and you sit with a diplomat and work with them. But what he's doing right now actually is very commendable. And it must be understood in the context that when Moses Kuria, the Minister for Trade, was speaking the other day, he said there is imbalance between South Africa and Kenya in terms of what we are giving them and what we are receiving. Our viewers should know that when you import more and export less, you are affecting the foreign exchange. When you don't have foreign direct investment, when you don't have foreign companies coming into Kenya, taking up local companies or partnering with the locals so that they bring all that money and invest it and use it here. When you don't have Chinese companies making cement here in Nairobi, when they don't bring their machineries and make, Japan comes here and creates a plant over here and then makes vehicles. Those are the dynamics of economics. And I think when the president is trying to be good at his diplomacy, initiatives, he must bear in mind that we need China the same way we need Europe and America. You cannot all of a sudden say, because the former regime was really leaning towards China. Now we need to work with the West. That would be a big mistake. Kenya is now a very beautiful girl awaiting marriage, or rather awaiting proposals from several suitors so that she can be married. Everybody in the global scene gets worried when governments change, because they are anxious. I mean, are we going to continue with the same agreements? As you have seen already, Murkomen has indicated that they are not very comfortable with the SGR deal. So there is a possibility we will open further discussions and negotiations on the SGR deal and many other international agreements. But I think what is more important, there's an agreement called Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we are trying to, Africa is trying to create open markets for Africans so we can trade with Libya directly. I think many more countries will be expanding and removing these restrictive visa rules, not only for Kenyans but within African countries. That is the intention of such an agreement. So I just wanted to implore that the State House should be careful how they disconnect with China. In fact, they should not. They should use, the State House should use the partnership with the Europe and with the West and Americas as a tool to tell China, now we are getting better deals here. So what you do, all the outstanding penalties and interests must be waived so that Kenyans can see the benefit of that this kind of diplomacy. It should be beneficial to everybody, yes. And
talking about international relations, he assigned, retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, the peace envoy on his inauguration day, while, Uhuru Kenyatta himself was there. And, this also speaks to sort of his intention, and we've seen how he said, even with the DRC troops, the deployment to the East Africa Regional Force, that it is important and necessary to have this happen. So when you look at, not only the West, the East, and everywhere else, but even locally and regionally, how is he handling it in your view?
You remember we discussed this show times above number on what role would President Kenyatta ideally play post-retirement, yes. And the fact that he's taken these international assignments and is now, President Kenyatta is like a fish in water. Is in his perfect element. The conversations from South Africa around Eritrea and also in Nairobi are very enlightening. And in my view, he must stick to that course. He's now joined the club of Obasanjo, joined the club of Thabo Mbeki. These are the African statesmen that if there's going to be a crisis anywhere and you need people with political capital who command respect, that is where President Kenyatta fits in. And in my view, he should completely disconnect from Azimio and not even give his position on these wrangles so that he stays focused on the regional assignments. Now, talking about President Ruto, he has displayed two important things. There is the hard power and soft power. Now, for the hard power is what you witnessed yesterday when Kenyan troops went to DRC. That is hard power, reminding all our neighbors in the region that Kenya has got a very solid defense force, and you joke with Kenya at your own peril. Now, outside that, then now there's this soft power, these international visits, where he's been actively promoting Kenya as an international destination. And for the Kenya economy to grow, we need to do three things, which President Ruto has been doing very well. On the issue of commercial diplomacy, on the issue of economic diplomacy, because he has started promoting Kenya as an FDI destination. So it means that people will find Kenya a very attractive investment destination. Very soon you will find international companies, multinationals, all of them scrambling to set up their headquarters or regional offices in Kenya. The moment you have any one multinational coming to Kenya, they're going to rent space in Kenya, they're going to look for an office where they're going to stay, they're going to bring in international currency. That is very good for the economy. The second is to promote our exports abroad. Products like coffee and tea. You saw a few days ago, he promoted, or rather, he presided over a function where we were sending our tea to West Africa, to Ghana. Now, one wonders, the people in West Africa consume our tea and coffee, but it doesn't come from Kenya directly. It goes to Europe first, someplace in London or Brussels, then it goes to West Africa. But now they've come up with this initiative that it goes directly, and they even want to have a brand. Those are the proactive steps one is looking at. And then finally, promoting Kenya's human capital. Now, other countries like the Philippines, they prepare their human capital to serve the world. Kenya has got human capital, a surplus in almost every space. If you speak to the gentleman on my right, he will tell you Kenya has got a surplus lawyers. They may want to go and practice in other jurisdictions. Teachers, medical doctors, nurses, a number of them have not been employed, and we need to create opportunities for them. Now, when all that happens, then Kenya will start growing as an economy. Then Kenyans will be able to create jobs and will be able to create wealth. And in my view, so far, the pronouncements he's made so far is done very well.
But in the same context, Bichachi, whereas there are all these efforts to ensure that the currency, foreign exchange is brought in. You saw the comment by, was it Kipchumba Murkomen or Moses Kuria, who was saying that out of there was this leader who posted on Twitter that out of about 20 million or 30 million Kenyans applied for that green card. She speaks to how much the Kenyan resource so wants to go out there. But despite even the issue of the Saudi Arabia victims who come back into the country and how it has been handled, do you think in handling Ruto's diplomacy, it will speak towards ensuring that this human resource that Mokwa talks about is sort of divided? You have, the good ones are not only out there, but you also have some good ones left here.
The question of 30 million Kenyans applying for the US green card, I think it's not possible. I think that number is grossly exaggerated. Just if you look at our demographics, really, they are not enough. They're not 30 million is 3/5 of our country. Right, I think that number is exaggerated. But that being the case, that being said, we must also accept that the Kenyan is uncomfortable. We are uncomfortable with inflation. We are uncomfortable with the price of fuel. We are uncomfortable with the taxes and how they seem to be increasing. We are uncomfortable with the lack of opportunities, the lack of jobs. We are uncomfortable with a lot of graduates not being able to be employed at the level they need to be employed. There's a lot of underemployment in this country. And what that speaks to is that there's a critical issue that needs to be addressed. What is that? That Kenya needs to develop economically in leaps and bounds. That the government must address itself, number one, to the issues of standard of living, to the issues of bread and butter, to the issues of energy costs, to the issues of your electricity bill, which has gone up by 40%. The government needs to address itself to these issues. If it does not, the world is becoming more and more globalized. And as it globalizes, the West, the Arabian countries, America itself is looking for professionals to do the jobs that Americans and Europeans and Japanese, etc., are either unwilling to do or their aging populations simply cannot do. And therefore, the opportunity for Kenyans to work outside this country and develop and sustain other countries is quite big. So the question that this government must address itself to is, how do we make Kenya as lucrative a working place as Saudi Arabia? Why would it be that someone is willing to risk life and limb to go work in the blistering heat of Saudi Arabia, leaving the moderate climate of Kenya to go look for a better coin? That is what needs to be addressed. And I worry when the government says it's going to postpone its election promises. That's not how election promises work. Election promises should begin to be worked on from the moment you get into office. Why? Because the reason why the Kenyan people gave you the trust of their vote was because you'd execute that. So the issues of the standard of living needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency.
Briefly, before you go to a break.
Yes, you see, what I've also seen, actually many Kenyans love the country and we want to be here. Yes. And we are very enterprising also. The fact that you want to go out there and try something in Malaysia or Australia, it's not like you really want to, forget your country. I mean, most enterprising people, if you look at what they do in India, they go all over trying to. I think what Kenya should do, they should set a policy whereby once a person has gone out of the country, is properly followed and known where he has gone, what he's doing. You will realize that some countries, we are not registering our nationals who are actually going to that country. We don't even have embassy representatives who actually register that Mr. So-and-so has these qualifications and has come to this country. So it's important we understand that when Kenyans want to go to the United States, they necessarily don't want to vacate completely. Kenya must deal with security first and foremost. Number two, equalization of opportunities. We should have any Kenyan who is a thinker or innovative in any manner being allowed to fulfill his dream right here in the country. And I believe that's what the president has been reiterating every now and again.
You want to close?
Yeah, I beg to take a different trajectory from the conversation by my colleagues here. We should proactively encourage Kenyans to go wherever in the world they want to go. Look at the ICT, the multinationals from the US. All of them have got, okay, not all of them, probably 90% have got Indian CEOs. These are Asians who moved from India. They went to the UK, where they've got a prime minister, and they went to the States, where they're running the shows. So in my view, we must equip the normal or the average Kenyan with the skills they need to go and conquer the world. Maringa, would it be not so exciting that there's a Kenyan who is a prime minister in New Zealand, and another one in India, and another one a president in China, so that when you're having a G7 meeting or a G20, the common denominator is that all of them are Kenyans. Which means that as much as majority of Kenyans speak English, Kiswahili, and their mother tongue, maybe we should come up with another legal requirement that outside those three languages, people now must speak Spanish, and French and Portuguese, because right now we have amazing opportunities in Angola. If Kenyans knew the Portuguese, they would be there. I suspect part of the reason why Kenyans are having issues in Saudi Arabia is because maybe they don't speak the local language, Arabic, and they don't understand the local cultures. Because Kenyans have got a challenge. They go to Tanzania, when they're requesting for a cup of tea, they wanasema nipatie chai instead of saying kwamba naomba huduma. So we must be alive to these international cultures to avoid all these mischief.
Let's not open that Pandora's box, gentlemen, and take a short break. When we come back, we'll look at more happening politically and governance issues at the top of the hour. Do stay with us.